Chapter 5. Talon didn't really have the time to spare from recruiting. Still, she couldn't leave Forest Edge until she saw one place, the place where Brigg died. Years ago, she and her family lived on a farm on the outskirts of town, right next to the forest that spread up the Vingard Mountains like moss creeping over a rock. Since Talon had left, the huge oak tree that grew next to the house had fallen over, perhaps from a storm, perhaps from rot, and had cleft the remains of the small wooden building in two as neatly as a knife through a roast. Talon paused to look at it, only for a moment. It was not the house that she needed to see, but the field behind it. Brigg and her father had kept the forest at bay by chopping trees and weeding the saplings that were always popping up in the field. Now the forest was beginning to reclaim the field. Now, instead of walking through freshly plowed earth or shafts of wheat, Talon now had to walk amid young trees. Still, she knew exactly where she had stood that day. She walked to the precise spot where she first saw the copper dragon. She knelt on the ground and ran her hands over the earth. Closing her eyes, she could still hear the roar of the ground opening to release the horrifying worm that the copper dragon controlled. The last moment I was happy was the moment I saw that copper dragon, Talon thought as she looked up. Then she gasped. For a moment she thought the past was coming to life. Right in front of her a dragon roared as it approached. This dragon was smaller than the one who killed Brigg, but still it cast a shadow larger than two houses. It was a slightly different color too, more brown than copper, with green edging the wings. She glared at it. How dare it come here? Could she not be in peace from a dragon, even in this place, the one place she had avoided for so long? The dragon landed nearby and flapped its wings briskly. The breeze carried a faint stench to Talon, but she never took her eyes off the dragon. It regarded her with horrible bronze eyes. Talon whispered a prayer to Mishkael to take her fear away, and the goddess obliged. The fear vanished from her heart, but was replaced by hate. Talon and the dragon glared at each other for what seemed an eternity. Then, with a flap of wings that blew Talon's hair and cloak back, the dragon took to the skies and flew toward the forest, away from town. Relief flooded Talon, but then a horrible thought occurred to her. Had the dragon gone to the town first? Talon raced to the village, where nothing looked amiss. She ran to her parents' home and burst in the door. The two of them were sitting down to a meal and looked up at her in surprise. "You're all right!" Talon exclaimed. "Of course we're all right," said her mother, handing her a freshly baked piece of bread. "Why wouldn't we be?" "There was a dragon!" Talon gasped, squeezing the bread in her hands. "Out in the fields. It could have been a copper. I thought it had—" Talon's parents exchanged dark glances. "We didn't see it," her mother answered. "But why did it come here?" "I don't know." Tears of rage trickled down Talon's cheek. "No harm done here," her father said, patting Talon's shoulders. "That's not the point," Talon snapped. Her parents looked at her, startled. "This is only one more reason why these creatures should be banished. They shouldn't be allowed to just show up and frighten us at their whim. We need to do something." Talon's mother and father both nodded. "Go then," her mother said. "You keep meeting with people who can help banish those vile creatures. You're doing important work." Talon kissed her parents farewell and hurried back to the encampment. It wasn't far out of town, and she wanted to be sure everyone was well there too. "Talon!" Rama waved frantically. "Help me with Elred. He was hit bad." Elred laid on the ground, coughing. Talon caught a whiff of the horrific smell and waved a hand in front of her face. It smelled as though someone had set up a slaughterhouse in a privy. "It wasn't this bad when the dragon landed by me," Talon said as she knelt by Elred. She whispered a prayer and his breathing eased. "We attacked it," Rogan said, sticking his sword in the ground. "I would have given anything for a dragon lance, but Elred got off a few shots at it." Rama glared at him. "I hit him with magic as well." Rogan continued talking to Talon as though Rama had not said a word. "It attacked us with its breath. Most of us are all right now, but Elric got the worst of it. Was anyone hurt in town?" "It didn't go to the town, thank Mishkael," Talon said. "I saw it, though, outside town." "Did it attack you?" Elric sat up with a grimace. Everyone kneeling around him backed away a pace, covering their noses. He still smelled awful. No, it smelled bad, but nothing like here. Rama, do you happen to have any of that fine Palathian perfume? Rama ducked into the wagon and emerged with a small bottle. She uncorked it and reached as far as she could without touching Elrit, holding it under Elrit's nose. Rogan snorted. Where on Corinne did you expect to need that? A lady never travels without perfume, Rama said, pitching her voice to her best formal banquet tone. Everyone giggled except Rogan, who stalked off. Rama rolled her eyes at him and took the perfume back to the wagon. What was that about? Talon whispered to Elrit. Sibling skirmish, Elrit said, then clapped a hand over his mouth. I'm so sorry. You went to see where Talon looked at the tips of her leather shoes, picking from under her robe. It's all right. Anything you say couldn't hurt me more than the sight of that dragon. I stood in the exact same place I was when Brig and I first saw the copper dragon. Then the dragon that attacked camp landed in the field in front of me. You saw it too, Howard said. Did it breathe on you as well? No, it didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. Talon hit the ground next to her. I stood there in front of a dragon and I couldn't do anything. Rogan walked back to them, rubbing his hands together. There was a new light in his blue eyes, a light that made Talon wary. Would you like to do something? Rogan asked Talon. Something more than recruiting people and convincing them that the metallic dragons are just as dangerous as chromatic dragons? You know I would, more than anything. Elred and Rogan exchanged glances. I have an idea, Rogan said. I wasn't sure anyone would want to attempt it, but now... What is it? Rogan leaned close to Talon. What about capturing the dragon? Surely Rogan was joking, but Rogan rarely jested. In fact, Talon couldn't remember a time he'd ever really had a good laugh. Now he looked even more serious than usual. We can do it, Rogan said, especially with all the people we have now. All we need to do is track the dragon and capture it. Oh, that's all, is it? Elred butted in. Just how do you propose we might do that? It's small, Rogan said, starting a fire. It was past time for supper, which the dragon's attack had delayed. Not even an adult. It didn't throw any lightning at us, which probably means it's too young to do so. The only weapon it has is stench, and with the right preparation, we can handle that. That is not its only weapon, Talon exclaimed. Are you forgetting the claws, teeth, the fact that it can fly? Talon saw her friend's downcast faces and tried to explain. I do want to do this. I really do. But we can't forget how dangerous these creatures are. Talon, your entire town would help us with this, Rogan said. They can fight, set traps, track the dragon. If we set archers to shoot its wings, it won't be able to fly, and we can fight it on the ground. Talon pictured the scenario in her head. It could work, but something about this didn't seem right. Give me a night to think about it, Talon said finally. I'll pray to Mishgael about this. We can discuss it further in the morning. She didn't talk to anyone the rest of the evening, silently going through the motions of eating and washing up, as she pondered what was holding her back. Talon's parents had originally offered to open their home to her and her friends, but even after spending time with them, Talon thought that spending the night under the same roof with them, but not Brig, would be too much for her. I must be focused, she thought, not sorrowful. Talon spread her bedroll under a canvas awning, stretched between the wagon and two trees. She laid there for a while, watching the stars appear over the horizon. How could she sleep? She wasn't the least bit tired, and her mind raced with the questions that the day had brought up. The others fell asleep, one by one, except for Rogan. He would watch for dragons the first part of the night. Then a villager from Forest Edge would relieve him. Talon sighed and put her hand over her eyes to block the firelight. Talon? How would she ever get to sleep if people kept waking her? Talon sat up and opened her eyes, cranky and ready to grump at someone. An old woman dressed in a sky-blue robe knelt beside the fire. She smiled at Talon and held something up to the fire. Glittering rainbows spread across the woman's face as she turned the item over. Come here, child, the woman said. Talon rose and walked over. The woman was holding the jewel Elston had given Talon. Talon reached into her pouch, sure the woman had stolen the jewel from her, but her own jewel was still there. Talon held it in the firelight and as well. Light danced between the two jewels as though they spoke to each other. "The jewel is very beautiful," the woman said. "You should not hide it away." She pulled on her jewel, and molten metal stretched out from the points until it was transformed into a fine chain. She held out one hand to Talon. Without thinking, Talon put her jewel in the woman's hands. The lady chuckled. "Wealth does not rule you, my dear. Good." The woman fastened the chain to the jewel and held it up. It spun, catching the fire and reflecting light across the woman's and Talon's faces. "This belonged to Huma once," the woman said. Talon nodded as an idea struck her. "Will it help us capture a dragon? Is that what Huma used it for?" "Huma had his own path to walk. The lessons he learned were his alone. You will have your own path and lessons." The woman contemplated the gem. "Still, I think this might help you." Talon bowed, and the woman slipped the necklace over her head. As she lifted Talon's braids over the necklace, she brushed Talon's neck. In that instant, Talon knew who she was. "Mishkael!" Talon began to kneel, but the woman shook her head and pulled Talon to her feet. "You needed my advice, so I came." Mishkael smiled at her. "What would you ask of me?" "Should we try to capture the dragon?" Talon asked without hesitation. "Your fate and that of the bronze dragon are intertwined." The woman smiled at Talon. "I can tell you no more. I wish you good fortune on your quest." Blue light began to emanate from the woman, growing brighter and brighter. Talon closed her eyes against the brilliance. When she opened them again, she was in her bedroll, the first pale morning light creeping over her. As Talon sat up, something rolled across her chest. Looking down, she saw the jewel hanging from a fine chain about her neck, next to the medallion of Mishkael. Talon smiled. The others were already awake and fixing breakfast. They all turned to Talon as she walked toward them. No one said anything, but the question was in their eyes. "Mishkael came to me in a dream," Talon said, clasping her necklace. "We will capture the dragon." That'd be the end of chapter 5. Bye.